Welcome to Midnight Affairs, where secrets unravel, desires ignite, and bold stories keep you on the edge. Tonight begins Chapter 3, our very first story where passion meets betrayal in the most gripping way. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. The room was dark, lit only by the pale glow of the city skyline pressing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Daniel Hayes sat alone at his glass desk, fingers tapping a steady rhythm as he watched the security footage looping on his laptop. His face, usually calm, was twisted with quiet fury. On the screen, his wife, Elena, leaned too close to someone she never should have trusted. His business partner, Liam Carter. Their hushed laughter echoed through the speakers, intimate and undeniable. The betrayal was laid bare, searing into Daniel's chest like a hot blade. A storm brewed inside him, but outside he remained composed. Years of building his empire, sacrifices, and trust, shattered in a few stolen moments. Tonight he wasn't just a man betrayed. He was a man on the brink of calculated revenge. A sleek black envelope sat in front of him, documents inside detailing the plan he'd spent weeks perfecting. Elena and Liam had no idea their perfect little world was already crumbling, piece by piece, with Daniel pulling every string. The city lights flickered against the glass as he whispered, voice cold and final, "By tomorrow they'll have nothing." Daniel Hayes wasn't born into wealth. Raised in a small town by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, Daniel learned the meaning of struggle early on. Watching his mother exhaust herself shaped him, igniting a fire that pushed him to build something greater, something secure. After years of relentless work, Daniel built his financial empire from the ground up. He didn't inherit a legacy, he created it. A tech mogul, respected and feared in the business world, he was known for his calculated mind and unwavering drive. But beneath the sharp suits and boardroom victories, Daniel was a man who craved loyalty. That's why Elena captivated him. She wasn't just beautiful, she was poised, elegant, and supportive. At least that's how she seemed. They met at a charity gala a decade ago, her presence turning every head in the room. What started as quiet admiration bloomed into a whirlwind romance. Elena seemed to balance Daniel's intense ambition with grace, always the perfect wife at public events. But cracks in the facade had been showing for months. Late-night phone calls, unexplained absences, a distance that lingered between them despite her reassuring smiles. He had ignored the signs for too long, convincing himself his success was merely straining their bond. Liam Carter, on the other hand, had once been like a brother. They met during Daniel's early startup days when Liam was just another hungry entrepreneur. Daniel admired his boldness and offered him a role in the company. Together they transformed a struggling startup into a global powerhouse. Liam was charming, persuasive, and Daniel had trusted him with every corner of his business. But that trust had been misplaced. The footage Daniel watched wasn't a brief lapse in judgment, it was proof of something deeper. Elena and Liam had betrayed him for months, meeting in secret while Daniel focused on expanding the company's reach. What hurt more wasn't the betrayal itself but the quiet deception, the stolen moments they thought would remain hidden. Daniel had sacrificed too much to let it slide. Every deal, every late night, every bit of sweat that went into building his empire, he wasn't about to lose it all to 2 people who played him for a fool. Yet, Daniel wasn't a man who lashed out without strategy. He believed in control, precision. His plan was already in motion. Elena, despite her elegance, had grown comfortable with her lavish lifestyle, spending more than she realized with credit lines tied directly to Daniel's accounts. Liam had been quietly siphoning company funds, a trail Daniel had uncovered through months of silent investigation. Tonight wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure neither of them could ever rise again. Behind the perfect dinners, the social galas, and the public smiles, Daniel had been playing a long game. He had waited, gathering evidence, preparing documents. And tomorrow, when the papers were served, Elena would lose the mansion, the luxury cars, the accounts she so heavily relied on. Liam would find himself exposed for fraud, stripped of his role and reputation. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had burned the bridge. Daniel stared at his reflection in the window, the storm inside him matching the one gathering in the city skies. His voice, calm but cold, whispered, "You wanted everything, Elena. Tomorrow you'll have nothing." Daniel sat alone in his dimly lit study, the amber glow of the desk lamp carving long jagged shadows along the mahogany walls. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howling through the narrow cracks, as though echoing the storm surging within him. His hand trembled slightly as he refilled his glass with aged scotch, the ice cubes clinking softly against the crystal. He stared into the swirling liquid, his reflection distorted and twisted, much like the thoughts haunting his mind. The video kept replaying in his head. Elena, his wife, laughing softly in that expensive suite, her delicate hand resting on Liam's arm. The way she leaned into him so intimately, so comfortably. Each frame was seared into his memory like a brand, every glance between them lingering, calculated. This wasn't a drunken mistake. No. The timestamps had confirmed it. This betrayal wasn't a single moment of weakness. It was an affair, deliberate and ongoing for months. He had watched it in silence the first time, frozen. Then came the rage. A heat so fierce it left him breathless. He had paced the room, heart pounding, mind racing. He wanted to confront her immediately, to scream, to demand answers, but something darker held him back. That need for justice, for control. Daniel wasn't a man easily played. But this had made him a fool. The whispers had already begun to spread. Daniel could feel it. Subtle shifts in boardroom meetings. Fewer handshakes after investor calls. The financial world was unforgiving. Rumors floated, hushed conversations behind closed doors, suggesting Liam, his former business partner and friend, was positioning himself for a hostile takeover. A betrayal on two fronts. And Daniel's grip was slipping. Deals were faltering. Key investors hesitating. Not enough to sink his empire, not yet, but he saw the cracks forming. The scent of blood in the water. If he didn't act, if he didn't control the narrative, everything he had built would crumble. His name. His fortune. His legacy. Elena wasn't innocent in this. She had become reckless. The lavish shopping sprees. Jewelry. Designer gowns. Exclusive vacations he hadn't authorized. All bleeding from their joint accounts. The very accounts Daniel had meticulously built over years of sacrifice. And then there was Liam. Liam had been clever. The financial discrepancies were subtle. Small withdrawals from mutual business holdings, carefully spread out to avoid raising alarms. If Daniel hadn't dug deeper, they might have slipped by unnoticed. But the evidence was there now. Undeniable. Every lie exposed, every dollar tracked. And Daniel wasn't a man content with quiet separation. This wouldn't end with whispered apologies or private settlements. No. They had mocked his trust. They had made him a spectacle. He would make them pay. His plan was already in motion. The divorce papers were filed, meticulously crafted, airtight. Not just to sever ties but to ruin Elena's image in every social circle she valued. Her charity gala tomorrow, once the highlight of their shared success, would be the perfect setting. He could already imagine the whispers as the papers arrived mid-event, the sharp gasps as the press captured her shame. He had handpicked the delivery. A uniformed courier, cameras primed. The headline would write itself. Billionaire's wife served publicly, affair exposed amidst charity event. But Daniel wasn't stopping there. Liam would fall harder. Earlier that evening, Daniel had forwarded the evidence, proof of Liam's embezzlement, to the corporate fraud unit. Investigators would arrive at Liam's firm by noon tomorrow. The scandal would break in real time. Frozen accounts. Public disgrace. Liam would be left with nothing. Yet beneath the cold calculation, a bitter weight pressed on Daniel's chest. Was this enough? Would watching their downfall truly satisfy the ache in his gut? Or was he unraveling, piece by piece, with every move? The storm outside battered the windows, the wind howling like a warning. Daniel took a slow sip of his scotch, the burn matching the fire consuming him from within. Tomorrow everything would change. What seemed thrilling in the moment was now spiraling wildly out of control. The next morning, Daniel awoke with a heaviness pressing against his chest, the bitter taste of last night's scotch lingering on his tongue. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the warmth felt artificial, hollow. The plan was already in motion, and yet his mind wouldn't rest. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from his private investigator, Malcolm. Courier confirmed. Papers will be delivered at 8:45 p.m., exactly during the speech. Camera set. Daniel's jaw tightened. Everything was in place. The image of Elena's face crumbling in front of her elite circle played in his mind again, but the satisfaction felt muted. Downstairs, the mansion was eerily quiet. Elena had already left for final preparations at the gala venue. The absence of her presence felt heavier than he'd expected. The sound of his footsteps echoed too loudly as he walked toward his office. A folder lay on his desk, the financial records he'd used to expose Liam's theft. But something gnawed at him. The numbers, so precise, so perfect, felt too neat. Daniel prided himself on details, and something about Liam's error seemed intentional. Then came another message. This time from a blocked number. You're making a mistake. You don't know the full story. Daniel's breath caught. His hand hovered over the reply button, hesitating. Was it Elena? Liam? A threat? No. No one knew his plans. The tension twisted tighter. He needed more. By midday, Daniel was pacing in his study, the walls closing in. He had never felt so out of control. The storm he'd unleashed was building and the winds were shifting. The betrayal was undeniable, but now there were cracks in his certainty. He needed to see it for himself. 7:45 p.m. The gala sparkled under a canopy of crystal chandeliers, the room alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and elegant strings weaving through the air. Elena, in a shimmering navy gown that hugged her figure perfectly, looked radiant. Untouched. Unaware of the storm brewing. Daniel watched from the balcony above, unseen. Liam was there too, leaning close, whispering something into Elena's ear that made her smile. Rage coiled in Daniel's chest. 8:40 p.m. The courier had arrived, dressed sharply in black. He held a slim envelope, Daniel's weapon, tightly in his gloved hand, waiting for the cue. Elena stepped toward the stage, poised to deliver her speech. And that was when Daniel saw it. Liam wasn't smirking. He wasn't cocky. His expression was tight, his eyes flicking between Elena and the crowd like he was expecting something, dreading it. Daniel's heart hammered as he scanned the room, the walls pressing in. The pieces were moving too quickly and something was wrong. The courier moved. And Daniel felt it, like watching a train speeding toward a collision he'd set in motion, unable to stop. The tension had snapped. And now the fallout was seconds away. The courier's steps echoed unnaturally loud as he approached the stage. Each stride seemed slower, heavier. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out the gentle murmur of the crowd. Elena's voice, warm and confident, carried through the grand hall as she began her speech, her eyes sweeping over the audience. In times of challenge, we must hold integrity above all else. The words twisted in Daniel's chest like a blade. Integrity. The envelope passed from the courier's gloved hand to a server who crossed the floor with practiced grace, approaching the edge of the stage just as Elena finished her opening remarks. She accepted it without hesitation, her brow creasing ever so slightly as she unfolded the papers inside. Silence fell like a hammer. Daniel could see the moment the truth hit her, the slight parting of her lips, the way her chest rose as her breath caught. And then she read it aloud. Financial discrepancies. Liam Caldwell. Embezzlement. Proof submitted anonymously. Gasps rippled through the audience. Liam, standing near the bar, went pale, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble floor. Eyes shifted toward him, murmurs growing louder. Elena, no. That's not. Liam stepped forward, voice cracking. But it was too late. Security guards flanked him, responding to the scandal unfolding like a script they had rehearsed. Daniel had made sure of it. Every detail executed flawlessly, too flawlessly. Elena's voice shook as she spoke again, her eyes no longer focused on the audience but searching, scanning. Who would send this? This can't be right. Daniel felt the heat rise in his chest, a sick mixture of triumph and regret twisting inside him. She wasn't angry. She was hurt. And it was because of him. Suddenly, Liam broke free from the guards, his voice ragged. Daniel, you did this, didn't you? Show yourself. The entire room turned toward the balcony. The chandelier's light caught Daniel in sharp contrast, exposing him as he stepped forward. No shadows to hide behind anymore. Elena's face crumbled as realization dawned. You? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the pain in it sliced deeper than any accusation. Daniel opened his mouth, searching for words, but Liam's voice cut through first. You think I stole from her? I was protecting her. That transfer. His voice faltered, chest heaving. It was to pay off threats made against this foundation. I didn't tell you because the sound of security radios crackling made Daniel's head spin. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He'd been so certain. Elena descended from the stage, clutching the papers in trembling hands. She stopped just feet from him, voice breaking. Why, Daniel? Why would you do this? If you doubted Liam, why not come to me? I thought you deserved to know the truth, Daniel managed, his voice hollow. The truth? She held up the papers. This, or your version of it. The weight of his mistake crashed in full. He hadn't exposed a betrayal, he had become the betrayer. And now there was no taking it back. The night that began with elegance had dissolved into chaos. The soft melodies of the string quartet were long gone, replaced by a low hum of hushed whispers and the faint clicking of heels against the marble floor. The towering floral centerpieces seemed to wilt under the weight of the scandal that now clung to the air like a thick fog. Security had escorted Liam out, yet the damage lingered, impossible to ignore, impossible to undo. Daniel stood frozen near the grand staircase, the weight of Elena's glare pinning him in place as if the entire world had collapsed in that one terrible moment. Her expression, once warm and trusting, had hardened into something unfamiliar. Betrayal. Disbelief. Anger. Outside, through the towering glass doors, flashes from paparazzi cameras painted the night in bursts of harsh white light. Reporters swarmed the entrance, their voices a chaotic buzz pressing against the walls, hungry for a statement, for a headline. Wealthy entrepreneur Daniel Pierce sparks scandal at star-studded gala. The charity event, meant to raise funds for underprivileged children, had transformed into a public spectacle. Elena broke the silence first, her voice low but cutting, every word laced with barely controlled fury. You think you've saved me, Daniel? Or did you just destroy everything I've worked for? Her words sliced deeper than any public humiliation ever could. Daniel took a step closer, voice trembling but firm. Elena, I was trying to protect you. Liam, he's been hiding things. I have proof. Proof? She interrupted, her blue eyes flashing dangerously. A few bank statements? A couple of rumors you dug up? You humiliated a man I trusted, my business partner, in front of hundreds of people based on, what? Speculation? Do you have any idea what you've done? He swallowed hard, struggling to find words that wouldn't make it worse. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought. You thought wrong, she snapped, stepping back as if even his presence was tainting her. If you had any respect for me, you would have come to me privately. Instead, you chose to make a spectacle of it. Of us. The last words lingered, heavier than the music that had once filled the ballroom. Daniel's heart twisted. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to see Liam's deception, not turn against him. A sharp voice interrupted from behind, Elena's assistant, Amanda, clutching her phone with pale fingers. Her face was drained of all color. Elena, it's trending. She swallowed hard. You need to see this. Amanda extended the phone. On the screen, a viral clip was playing, the caption brutal. Millionaire philanthropist accused of fraud at own gala. Betrayed by close friend. The video looped, freezing at Daniel's face on the balcony, his hand raised in accusation while Liam was escorted out. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, her breath shaky. This will ruin us. The foundation. Liam's career. My reputation. Daniel stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. This wasn't just a headline. It was a public execution. Elena, he whispered, voice raw, you have to believe me. I was trying to protect you. She shook her head slowly, her voice like ice. Protect me? You've made me look weak. You've turned my entire life into a spectacle. Do you know how hard I've fought to be taken seriously in this city? To build this foundation with my name? And now I'm a trending scandal. The doors burst open again. Liam had returned. His face was pale but controlled, a bruise forming at his jawline. He wasn't alone. A tall man in a sharp suit flanked him, his attorney. Liam's gaze locked onto Daniel's, cold and unforgiving. You think you've won, Daniel? Think you've done some noble act of justice? Let me make this clear, you've destroyed my reputation. And there will be consequences. Daniel's pulse quickened. Liam, I had evidence. Oh, I'm sure you think you did, Liam cut in smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. But this? He gestured to the crowd of reporters just beyond the glass doors. This was a public spectacle. Defamation. Slander. My legal team is preparing a case as we speak. Elena's breath caught. Defamation? Liam's gaze softened as he looked at her. Elena, you know I would never jeopardize the foundation. Daniel twisted this into something ugly. Daniel's chest tightened. He was losing control. You're lying, Liam. I saw the offshore accounts. You saw what you wanted to see, Liam spat, voice growing louder. And now you've cost us all far more than a reputation hit. Donations are already being pulled. Amanda, still clutching the phone, nodded grimly. It's true. Sponsors are already distancing themselves. Elena's shoulders sagged as reality hit her like a blow. Daniel felt the room closing in. Elena, please. I did this for you. But her face was unreadable now, a mask of hurt and disbelief. Leave, she whispered. His heart broke. Elena? Leave? The fallout wasn't just public. It was personal. And it was far from over. The weight of the room pressed in around Daniel as Elena's cold dismissal echoed in his chest. He could feel his heart breaking, not from the public chaos, not from Liam's threats, but from the devastation in Elena's eyes. This was supposed to be the moment when everything came to light, when they could finally breathe again. But instead, it felt like everything had collapsed and he was the one responsible for the ruin. The door to the ballroom slammed behind him as he walked out into the dimly lit hallway, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his failure. The flashes from the cameras outside could still be seen through the tall windows, like lightning strikes in the distance. His mind spun, unsure of what was worse, the potential lawsuit from Liam or the look on Elena's face. She was done with him. The trust they had built, gone in a heartbeat. As he moved through the corridor, Amanda appeared beside him, her face pale with stress. She pulled at his arm, urging him to look at something on her phone. You need to see this, Daniel. She handed him the screen where another viral clip was playing. This time it was a video of him. His voice raised, his finger pointing accusingly at Liam, the scene playing out as though Daniel were the villain. The caption read, "Is Daniel Pierce the true mastermind behind the scandal?" The clip showed him at the gala, standing tall with the crowd looking on. But this time, the frame zoomed in on his face, distorting his expression, making him appear aggressive, out of control. Amanda's voice trembled. This is going viral. People are calling you a liar, saying you set Liam up. They're even digging up old rumors about you, about your past business deals. Daniel's stomach turned. He didn't know which way to turn anymore. Every move he made seemed to deepen the hole he had dug for himself. It wasn't just a ruined event now. It was his reputation, his career, and, most painfully, his relationship with Elena. This isn't how it was supposed to happen, Daniel muttered, his fingers trembling on the phone. I was trying to protect her. Amanda shot him a worried glance. I know. But it's too late. People are turning against you. And Liam? She shook her head. He's playing the victim and it's working. Daniel clenched his fists, frustration building. Every time he thought the truth would set him free, it only seemed to trap him further. I need to fix this. I need to go back in there and... No, Amanda stopped him, her voice sharp. You can't go back in there. If you do, it'll only make things worse. Trust me, Daniel. Right now, the best thing you can do is disappear for a while. Let this blow over. Let the heat die down. He glanced back toward the ballroom, where security was still keeping the reporters at bay. He could still hear the distant hum of the paparazzi's voices outside, and the thought of his life being reduced to a headline made his skin crawl. But the one thing that stung most wasn't the press or the scandal. It was the quiet, painful realization that Elena might never forgive him. I'm not going anywhere, he said, his voice low but determined. Before Amanda could argue, a loud commotion from the ballroom broke their tense silence. Daniel's eyes shot up. He recognized the voices, Elena's and Liam's. They were shouting. Without thinking, Daniel rushed toward the source of the noise. He could hear Elena's voice, frantic and full of raw emotion. You think this is over? Liam shouted, his voice like a whip crack. This is just the beginning, Elena. You think you can just throw me out like some pawn? I'll make sure this whole city knows who you really are. Daniel's heart stopped. He pushed through the doors into the ballroom, finding Elena and Liam in the middle of a heated argument. Elena's face was flushed with anger, but there was fear in her eyes too, fear that Daniel hadn't seen before. What the hell is going on? Daniel demanded, his voice shaking with the intensity of the moment. Liam turned, his eyes narrowing. Get out, Daniel. You've done enough damage. I don't need you here ruining everything I've worked for. But Elena's eyes were on him, searching for something, anything, to salvage from the wreckage. Daniel, please, she said, her voice cracking. You've got to leave. Just leave me alone. You've already ruined everything. The pain in her words felt like a slap. Daniel froze, unsure of what to do or say. He had wanted to fix things, to make everything right. But every time he tried, it seemed to only make matters worse. Liam wasn't finished. He stepped toward Elena, his tone suddenly softer, like a predator closing in on its prey. Elena, you don't need to listen to him. He's just a man who's made his own mistakes. I've always had your best interests at heart. You know that, right? Elena's eyes flickered between the two men. Her face crumpled, a mixture of frustration and heartache. I don't know who to believe anymore, she whispered. Daniel's chest tightened. It felt as if the ground beneath him was collapsing. He had never imagined Elena would look at him like this, like he was a stranger, like he was the enemy. The room felt suffocating. His hands balled into fists, the desire to fix everything, to redeem himself, overwhelming. Elena, please. You can't. But before he could finish, Liam stepped in between them, cutting him off. Enough, Daniel. It's too late. The damage is done. And with those words, the air seemed to freeze. The truth, so painfully clear, yet impossible to undo, hung heavy between them all. There was no going back from this. No more pretending that things could be fixed with a few words, no more hope that they could undo the damage caused by one reckless, misguided choice. As the truth emerged, there was no turning back. The echo of those final words, "It's too late," clung to Daniel like a weight he couldn't escape. Even after the words left Liam's mouth, the room felt frozen in time. The noise of the party, the distant murmur of reporters, and the frantic chaos from earlier had all faded into the background, leaving only the silence of truth. Elena stood there, her eyes still locked on him, but it wasn't the look of the woman he had once known. This wasn't the Elena who smiled when she saw him, or the one who trusted him with her secrets. This was someone different, someone broken. The remnants of their love were scattered, trampled under the weight of everything that had gone wrong. Daniel stepped back, his body moving without thought, as if his mind couldn't comprehend the finality of the moment. He wanted to say something, anything that could change Elena's mind, but the words wouldn't come. The damage was done. The lies, the betrayals, the miscalculations, everything had led to this. Amanda watched from the doorway, her face strained, but there was no comfort to offer. She knew as well as Daniel did that this was the end. The fallout wasn't just about what had happened in the ballroom, it was about everything that had been built on the lies, the secrets that had always lurked beneath the surface. There were no easy answers now, no way to fix what was broken. Daniel turned and left the room, his mind a whirl of regrets, and his heart heavy with the weight of Elena's absence. As he walked down the hallway, away from the only life he had ever known, the truth seemed to suffocate him. It wasn't just the public scandal, the viral videos, or the inevitable lawsuit. It was the loss of something far more personal, the trust he had betrayed, the love he had thrown away. And somewhere deep inside he knew it wasn't just Elena he had failed. He had failed himself too. In the distance, the flashing lights of cameras pulsed like a heartbeat. They followed him like a shadow, relentless, capturing every moment of his fall from grace. And as he stepped outside into the cold night air, Daniel realized that his world had irrevocably changed. There would be no going back, no way to undo the damage. He would have to face the consequences alone. But the hardest part? The hardest part was knowing that, no matter what happened next, Elena was lost to him. And that was a loss he didn't know how to live with. In the end, every choice had consequences. Every action had a ripple effect that could never be fully predicted. Daniel's story wasn't just about a public scandal, it was about the personal cost of betrayal, of trying to hold on to something at all costs, even when the truth had been hidden for far too long. As silence fell, the echoes of their choices lingered in the air. The lesson was clear, but the damage? Irreparable. And the hardest truth of all, not every story has a happy ending. For Daniel, it was a hard lesson learned too late. And for Elena, the echoes of what could have been would haunt her long after the lights had dimmed and the cameras had gone silent. But that too was the price of love, of secrets, and of betrayal. The cost of their choices was now impossible to ignore. The real question was, how would they both live with it? As the door swung shut behind him, Daniel's reflection on the glass was the only thing left to stare back at him. Alone. The past has a way of creeping back even when buried deep. Daniel's hands trembled as he sat in the quiet of his car, the sound of the engine ticking softly in the cold night air. The neon lights of the city blurred in the distance, but all he could see were the images from years ago, from the moment that had changed everything. It was a hot summer evening when he first met Elena, back when she was still just a mystery, an enigmatic woman with a smile that could brighten any room. They had met at a party, one of those extravagant gatherings that people like Daniel attended for the sole purpose of getting ahead, of keeping up appearances. But from the first conversation, something had been different with Elena. She wasn't like the others. She didn't play the game. He remembered their first talk as if it had just happened yesterday. They stood outside on the balcony of an upscale Manhattan building, the city stretching below them like a blanket of lights. Elena, with her eyes fixed on the skyline, had spoken about her dreams, her goals, and the way the world felt like it was closing in on her. She was ambitious, yes, but she was also lost, searching for something she couldn't quite define. Daniel had found himself intrigued by her vulnerability. She wasn't like the women who simply wanted the latest fashion or the next glamorous event. Elena had a depth that drew him in, and somewhere along the way that vulnerability had turned into something else. Something stronger, something they couldn't ignore. What he hadn't known at that moment, though, was that she was hiding a secret. One that neither of them would realize the weight of until much later. The memory of their first night together played in his mind. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Elena had come to him that night, not just with a hunger for love, but with a need to escape. She had confessed her fears, her insecurities. She had spoken of an old love that had left her broken, of a betrayal she couldn't forgive. And in the heat of that moment, Daniel had promised to never be that man. To never betray her. But somewhere along the line he had done just that. Now, as he sat in his car, Daniel's thoughts drifted back to a night months before the scandal had broken. He had found a hidden folder on Elena's laptop, a set of emails she had carefully stored away. The subject line had caught his attention, the truth about Liam. It had been a name he had never seen before, a name that didn't belong in their relationship. What he had found inside those emails was a web of lies. Elena had been in touch with Liam, someone from her past. Someone she had told Daniel she had moved on from. She hadn't just stayed in contact. They had shared intimate details, memories of a relationship that Daniel hadn't known about. Worse, there were hints of more. Of feelings that hadn't faded, even as she had built a life with Daniel. The shock of it had left him reeling. How could she keep this from him? How could she keep such an important part of her past hidden? And why hadn't she told him about Liam when he had been so open about his own past mistakes? But instead of confronting her, Daniel had buried the truth. He had ignored it, convincing himself that their relationship was strong enough to overcome anything. He told himself that love was all that mattered, and that this was just a momentary lapse in judgment, a piece of her past that didn't need to resurface. Now, looking back, he knew that was where everything had started to fall apart. His inability to face the truth had only made things worse. If he had confronted her then, if they had talked about it, maybe things would have been different. But he hadn't. And the secret had festered, only to explode in the most disastrous way possible. As Daniel stared at the neon lights outside, a sudden thought struck him. What if Elena had known? What if she had known about his discovery? Had she been playing him all along? The possibility made his chest tighten, and for a moment he felt suffocated by the weight of it all. The lies, the deceit, the games. Were they both trapped in a cycle of self-destruction? In his mind, Daniel replayed the conversations he had had with Elena in the past few weeks. How she had become distant, how her eyes no longer held the same warmth they once had. Had she been hiding her feelings from him, just as he had hidden his discovery from her? Or was it something more, something darker that neither of them had been able to admit? A sudden knock on the window brought him out of his thoughts. He looked up, startled, and saw Amanda standing there, her expression unreadable. She had been quiet ever since the party, but Daniel could sense she had been watching him. She knew there was more to the story, more to the affair, and somehow she had become part of the puzzle that was his unraveling life. Amanda didn't wait for him to roll the window down. She opened the door and slid into the passenger seat, her eyes scanning his face. "You can't keep running from this, Daniel," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. He didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. What was there to say? I know what you're thinking, Amanda continued. You think you've failed, that you've lost her because of your mistakes, but there's something you don't know. Something that's been hidden from both of you. Daniel turned toward her, his heart racing. What are you talking about? Amanda sighed, her gaze dropping to her hands. It's Elena. There's something she hasn't told you, something she's been keeping from everyone, something that goes beyond you, beyond Liam. And it's bigger than anything you could have imagined. His pulse quickened. His mind spun with questions. What do you mean? She wasn't just hiding Liam. She was hiding the truth about everything. The truth about her family, her past, the way she's been manipulated all along. Amanda's voice was heavy with the weight of her words. And the worst part is, she didn't just keep secrets from you. She kept secrets from herself. The revelation hit Daniel like a ton of bricks. He felt dizzy, the world spinning out of his control. The Elena he thought he knew, the woman he had built his life around, was she even the same person? What had he truly been a part of all these years? What had he missed? As the pieces began to fall into place, Daniel realized one thing with gut-wrenching clarity. Everything he thought he knew about Elena, everything he believed about their relationship, had been a lie. The past had a way of creeping back even when buried deep. And now, the truth was going to consume them both. Help can come from the most unlikely places, or so it seemed. The muffled sound of the phone ringing on the other side of the room broke Daniel's concentration, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. He turned his gaze toward the sound, his hand reaching instinctively for the receiver. As his fingers brushed against the cold plastic, his heart pounded harder in his chest. It was Amanda. Her voice crackled through the receiver, low and urgent, as if she were standing right next to him. Daniel, we need to talk. There's something I didn't tell you. Something you need to hear. He froze. The room felt suddenly smaller, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like an unseen hand. The words lingered in the air, their meaning swirling around him like smoke. He thought back to her cryptic warning earlier, to her promises of a truth buried deep within the shadows. What was she holding back now? I'm listening, Daniel finally managed, though his voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder would expose him to something he wasn't ready to face. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a hesitation that was both strange and telling. Amanda wasn't the type to keep secrets, but then again, none of this had been normal. None of it had been easy. When she finally spoke, her words were slow and deliberate, as though she was choosing them with care. It's about Elena. About her past. You've been asking yourself questions. About Liam, about why she's been so distant. But there's something more. Something darker. Daniel's grip on the phone tightened, his pulse racing. Every muscle in his body screamed to push back, to shut down the conversation before it could go any further. But something in Amanda's tone stopped him. She wasn't speaking with the venom of an enemy. No, this was different. She was speaking with the quiet urgency of someone who knew a truth too dangerous to hide any longer. Tell me, Daniel said, his voice shaky but determined. Don't rush into this, Amanda cautioned. What I'm about to say could change everything. You need to be prepared for what you're about to hear. Daniel's mind was racing, but he forced himself to take a breath. I've already been through hell. Just tell me. Amanda exhaled softly, the sound faint but somehow full of meaning. Elena's not the woman you think she is. And what she's been hiding from you goes beyond just Liam. It's more than betrayal, it's manipulation. And I think she's been lying to both of us for a long time. The words cut through Daniel like a cold wind. His stomach twisted, a knot of dread forming deep in his gut. What do you mean? What could she possibly be hiding from both of us? You've seen how she's changed, haven't you? Amanda continued, her voice barely a whisper now. How she's pulled away, how distant she's been. You think it's because of Liam, but it's not. Not entirely. The truth is, Elena's been playing both sides, and all along, you were never her only priority. There's someone else in the picture. Daniel's blood ran cold. The mere thought of Elena hiding another secret, of someone else being involved, made his heart beat faster. Was she playing him all along? Had everything been a lie from the start? Amanda, Daniel's voice faltered. Who is it? Who else is involved? A pause stretched between them, thick with tension, before Amanda spoke again, her voice strained. It's her brother. Gregor. Daniel's mind went blank. Her brother? He repeated the words like a broken record, trying to make sense of what she was saying. He had heard of Gregor, vaguely through Elena's passing mentions, but never enough to understand what role he played in her life. Elena had always portrayed him as just another distant relative, someone she rarely spoke to, someone she had distanced herself from. But now, Amanda was implying something entirely different. Something dangerous. Yes, he's been pulling the strings. He's the one who convinced her to keep secrets from you. He's been the one controlling everything from the shadows. Controlling? Daniel's voice cracked. What are you talking about? How could I have missed this? Amanda's words hit him like a slap. Gregor's not just some family member. He's been manipulating Elena for years. And she's been keeping him close under the guise of family loyalty. But it's more than that. He's been using her. Pushing her into decisions that aren't just bad for her. They're bad for both of you. Daniel's mind was spinning. He couldn't process it fast enough, couldn't make sense of the twisting maze of lies and secrets that had been hidden from him for so long. Elena, his Elena, had been hiding this whole time. Not just a betrayal with Liam. No, this was much worse. This was something far deeper, far more toxic than he could have ever imagined. Why would she do that? Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. Why wouldn't she tell me about him? Because she didn't want to see the truth, Amanda explained. She didn't want to face what Gregor has been doing to her. She's been trapped in his influence for so long that she started to believe it was the only way. She thought keeping you in the dark would protect you. But it didn't. Daniel's heart sank. The Elena he had trusted, the woman he had built a life with, had been living in a web of lies spun by her own brother. And worse, she had kept it from him, kept him in the dark about the very thing that had been pulling the strings of their relationship all along. And you? Daniel's voice trailed off as he tried to make sense of Amanda's involvement. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Amanda paused. Then she spoke, her voice softer, almost regretful. Because I've been where you are. I've seen what it's like to be manipulated. And I don't want you to fall into the same trap. Daniel's thoughts were a blur, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him like a tidal wave. But then, something unexpected happened. In the midst of his confusion, he realized one thing. Amanda wasn't just trying to warn him. She was trying to help. She wasn't out to destroy Elena, but to save them both from the monster Gregor had created. Daniel's heart was racing, his mind a storm of emotions. What do I do now? How do I even begin to face this? Amanda's voice was quiet but firm. You confront Elena. You demand the truth no matter how painful it is. And when you do, remember one thing. You're not alone in this anymore. As Daniel sat back in his chair, staring at the flickering lights outside, a strange feeling washed over him. The weight of the truth was still heavy, but Amanda's words gave him a strange sense of purpose. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected ally could help him turn things around. But as he sat there, trying to make sense of it all, one thing was clear. The road ahead was going to be even more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Some choices leave scars no matter which path you take. Daniel sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the weight of Amanda's words pressing down on him like an unshakable fog. His thoughts were tangled, a mess of confusion, anger, and fear. Elena, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had given his heart to, was not who he thought she was. The truth Amanda had revealed, about Elena's manipulation, about her brother Gregor, felt like a slap in the face, and yet, it didn't make any sense. Was it really possible that Elena had been living in this web of lies all along? His hand trembled slightly as he picked up his phone, staring at Elena's name flashing on the screen. He had told himself he would confront her. He had promised himself he would demand the truth. But now, as the phone vibrated in his hand, the idea of calling her felt impossible. He wasn't sure if he could trust his own judgment anymore. The line between truth and betrayal was so blurred now that every instinct he had was questioning everything. He could feel the tightness in his chest, his heart pounding as his mind raced with conflicting emotions. What was he supposed to do? Amanda had given him a lifeline, an ally in a sea of uncertainty. But what if she was wrong? What if Gregor was the true villain here, manipulating not just Elena but him too? And what if Amanda's own motives weren't as pure as she made them seem? Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone? His finger hovered over the dial button, but something stopped him. Doubt. What if confronting Elena destroyed everything? What if the trust they had built, however fragile it was, shattered into 1,000 pieces? The idea of losing her was unbearable, and yet he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. Was it better to confront the truth even if it meant losing everything? Or was it safer to bury his doubts and keep the illusion intact, however dangerous that might be? His thoughts spiraled back to the moments with Elena. The times they had shared, the laughter, the intimacy, the way she had always been there when he needed her most. Was it all a lie? Had those moments been a mere act, a performance for his benefit? He didn't want to believe it. He wanted to hold on to the person he had fallen in love with, the person who had seemed so genuine, so open. But now, everything was clouded with suspicion, and every memory felt tainted by the weight of this new truth. But as Daniel sat there, his thoughts whirling in an endless cycle, a quiet voice deep inside him whispered one undeniable truth. He couldn't keep living in this fog. He couldn't pretend like the truth didn't matter, like everything would be okay if he just ignored the cracks that had started to form. Whether it was Elena's betrayal, or Gregor's manipulation, or something else entirely, Daniel knew one thing for sure. He had to face whatever was coming, even if it meant facing the hardest choice of his life. He stood up abruptly, the decision forming in his mind. There was no turning back now. He had to confront Elena. No more secrets. No more running from the truth. The moral crossroads he stood at was stark, the path ahead uncertain, but one thing was clear. It was a choice he had to make, for better or worse. The consequences of this moment would shape his future, and he couldn't let fear dictate his path. He walked toward the door, each step heavy with the weight of the decision. He could feel the weight of Amanda's voice in his ears, urging him to face the truth, urging him to trust himself. But even as he reached for the door handle, doubt crept in once more. What if confronting Elena destroyed everything? What if the consequences were too great? He hesitated, his fingers brushing the cool metal of the handle, but in that moment, something inside him solidified. He couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. Whatever happened next, he had to know the truth. The world outside felt colder than before, the night air biting at his skin as he stepped out into the unknown. The city seemed different now, more distant, like a world he no longer understood. Each passing car, each flicker of streetlight, reminded him that the life he had known was slipping through his fingers, and there was no guarantee of what lay ahead. As he made his way toward Elena's apartment, the weight of the decision settled in his bones. This wasn't just about confronting her, it was about confronting himself. Could he live with the truth no matter how painful it was? Could he accept that everything he thought he knew might be a lie? Could he walk away from Elena, if that's what the truth demanded? He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to try. There was no other way forward.